Good evening. I want to briefly talk about some websites and digital tools that you can use in your classroom, not only for ESL learners, but for all of your students. Since COVID-19, many of us have been teaching remotely or following a hybrid schedule. Here you can see the difference between remote instruction versus online teaching and learning. Remote instruction, moving content designed for face-to-face instruction, online for limited or one-time only course instruction. Online teaching and learning, the purposeful design and implementation of an online course to support online teaching and learning. And of course, this has been a difficult time, and I personally do not think that this crisis with COVID-19 is over. And I believe in the fall that we're going to have to return to a hybrid schedule, or we're going to have to go back to remote virtual instruction. Because I had experience with community college level and I've worked on a collegiate level, I had the opportunity to design online courses and the opportunity to teach virtually. And so when the pandemic came, I was not um, I felt like I was in a good place. I was familiar with Blackboard and Google Classroom, Google Meet, Canvas, all of these different platforms I was familiar with because I had worked on the community level and on the collegiate level, designing online courses and working with students virtually. How can we increase engagement online and what kind of strategies can be implemented? There are so many platforms that can be used to make learning engaging and meaningful for students, where we can add rigor and relevance to the curriculum. These are just a few suggestions. You have Agenda Web, Grammar Bites, Grammar Snack, Brain Pop, English Club, Purdue Owl, Perfect English Grammar, usingenglish.com. These are just a few websites that you can use to enhance and improve your students' skills in language arts. There are also other books that you can use to enhance your students' reading and listening skills. Students can annotate on documents or use websites such as Get Epic, which is English and Spanish. Unite for Literacy is English and Spanish. Common Lit, ReadWorks. One of the people I interviewed mentioned this website that they like to use in their ESL class. Get Epic also has quizzes for certain books. Also, it has videos and other materials as well. The books are also read aloud to students, or students can read them on their own. They have graphic novels, chapter books, picture books as well. For listening exercises, there are many podcasts that your students can listen to, and they can write summaries or answer questionnaires via the chat box or Google Forms. Here I use sticky notes with my students as they read the book, and I ask them questions about the characters, the setting, and the plot, and how they're feeling about the book. They'll write their answer on a sticky note and place it inside of the book if they have questions or comments. Other websites that students can use in lieu of sticky notes: Wall Wisher, Poplet, Primary Wall, Scrumbler, or just a few. Penzu is an online diary that you can use with your students. I have used it for years when I'm reading. Let's say, for example, we're reading a chapter book and I want students to write a response or do a character analysis. They can use Penzu. Storybird is another good website. When I first started using Storybird, it was for free, but now I think you must have a subscription. Students could choose the art background and then they make the story into a book, either a picture book or a chapter book. Pose Everywhere is also something I use to keep students engaged about how they're feeling about a class or if I have questions that I want them to respond to. Here are some other digital tools I want to point out. Comic Master, ABC Teach, Chat Shepherd software has English, language arts, social studies, and math. Nearpod is another website that's very interactive with all the content areas: science, math, social studies. It has or recognizes Black History Month, Asian History Month, Native American Month, Latino Month, so many different topics and concepts they cover on Nearpod. They also use a lot of videos and different websites, YouTube, just to name a few. Brain Pop, Espanol and Brain Pop, ABCR is Instagrok. That's a very good website for doing graphic organizers and concept mapping. Lapster, where you can have a virtual online science lab. And of course, I love doing STEM activities with my students. In this grade level, the classroom teacher was covering the weather, so we made tornadoes in the jar with dish detergent and vinegar and so forth. Here are some other digital tools. Of course, Kahoot, Quiz, Starfall, Story Place, Spelling City, TikTok, Learn Zillion, Adobe Spark, Wix. I've even had students to create their own websites about a particular topic. AgendaWeb is a great site for students to study and enhance their skills with grammar, mechanics, punctuation, spelling, listening skills, reading skills, parts of speech, Common Lit, Tumble Books, Free Rice. And of course, if you want Duolingo, that teaches students how to speak different languages. It's very interactive. I use it to practice my Spanish. Earth Album, Play Spotting. Sometimes you feel like you're running on empty, trying to find the right ideas to keep your classroom engaging and interactive. So it's really helpful when you can find a place where you can get good resources to help you improve your art of teaching. Of course, I have learned something new, the Bitmoji, and with every object is linked to a website. The books here, Pete the Cat, Brown Bear, Brown Bear. You can post announcements, introductions on the board in your Bitmoji classroom. The Bitmoji can help you build classroom community and engagement. Here they have something with the alphabets, your different stories here. Go Noodle. Student engagement is critical to learning, and it may be measured by behavioral indicators such as observational learning and application learning behaviors. Observational learning behaviors include reading emails, discussion posts, documents. Always provide your students with virtual badges and certificate give constructive criticism. Virtual background is another great tool, and you will see that in one of the lessons in chapter 5, the teacher's workroom. If you're teaching a lesson about place value online, your virtual background should show a model of for place value where they could see ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 100,000, million, and so forth. I taught a lesson on fairy tales, and in the background, my students could see the characteristics of a good fairy tale. Of course, I love using breakout rooms in Zoom and also in Google Meet. This is a good time for students to work in groups, to do discussion questions, play games, to do readers theater. Always make sure that your students understand from day one that everyone has a job within the group and they're responsible and accountable for their role. These are some of the roles that you can give students within the group: troubleshooter, recorder, reporter, timekeeper, the speaker, the leader, the material manager, the helper. I always love having my students to work using whiteboards and teaming up with a partner, answering different questions. Here, they're practicing spelling with their word lists. Here are some more roles that you can give students within the group. Of course, before the pandemic, I was always a teacher that loved doing science experiments, STEM activities. If they're learning the alphabet or how to spell simple words, having students to write in shaving cream the letters. This is a kindergarten class, and students really enjoyed this activity, but they also had practice with their letters as well. And I also wanted to talk about another key strategy. I wanted to talk about using sentence strips. What is the purpose of using sentence strips? If you will see this in your syllabus. The use of sentence strips encourages children to read words together and make them efficient readers as well as efficient writers. Sentence strips improves the fluency in reading and writing. From writing sentences, children can progress to writing paragraphs. They are handy, multi-purpose sentence strips. They're usually 24 inches wide, 3 inches maybe in height. And usually you have 100 strips in a package. You can also have your students to use word strips where they print out keywords and phrases. There are many different ways that you can use sentence strips for your ELLs. For example, you can use sentence strips to put items on a continuum. It encourages higher order thinking skills and allows students to figure out the meanings and relationships among new words. You can use sentence strips to sequence the events of a movie or a book. Make sentence strips from sentences in the movie. After watching the movie, the partners work together to sequence the events. You can use sentence strips to match sentence have. What is the subject of the sentence? What is the predicate of the sentence? This also works well with cause and effect, problem solution, or conditional sentences. And those are just a few ideas that you can also do with your ESL students. You can also use it in math. If you're teaching about patterns, have students to identify and extend it. You can write your objectives on sentence strips. You could do a vocabulary inside outside circle activity. You could put spelling words within a pocket chart. I also like using popsicle sticks in spelling of the words. You can use sentence strips for students to write down the different ways, the different tenses of a verb. I walked, I'm walking. Sentence strips can also be used to create paper chains where they can do spelling of the word. I used to put sentence strips on my bulletin board so that students can complete the sentence strip with the correct word. You will also see within the course a model remote lesson using Microsoft Team, rhyming words with an ESL student. Now we're going to continue watching a reading intervention with a kindergarten student with letter names. We started this video in the previous lecture, but it was suddenly, there was an interruption.
Like to eat?
Ice cream.
What kind of ice cream?
Vanilla and chocolate.
Reese is in kindergarten at Windy Hill Elementary in Calvert County, Maryland. Before he can learn how to read, he'll need to master all 26 letters of the alphabet. Reese knows most of them, and reading expert Linda Farrell is going to help him with the last few that he needs to learn.
Letters have to be absolutely automatic, all 26, because when you're reading, so many different things are going on. You cannot be struggling with which letter, is this a V or a Y? It's going to, even those two confusions will slow up reading forever. I would like you to sing the alphabet song for me.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
I
can go quicker.
No, that was quick enough. I could hardly keep up. Reese could sing the alphabet song, sort of. He would be what many teachers would say, oh, yeah, he can sing the song. If you listened really carefully, you would hear that Reese had difficulty when he sang the song articulating LMNOP, which is also, many children have that, and he had difficulty articulating the W. When we got to letter naming, it was very interesting. W is one of the letters that he didn't know. We find this often, is that the source of a confusion for a letter name will often go back to you find that same confusion in singing the song. So when children have difficulty with letter names, it isn't as easy for them as it is for other children to learn this shape. This abstract shape has this abstract name. And some kids learn that easily, and some kids need more practice. And Reese is one who needs practice. What we're going to do is we are going to sing the alphabet song and touch the letters as we sing. Okay? So get your finger. Now, sing the first row.
A, B, C, D,
Stop. Okay, so you sang the first row. Okay, now go and sing the whole thing to here.
A, B, C, D.
Asking Reese to touch the letters ensures that he'll look at the letters as he sings.
N, O, M, O, P.
Okay, now this row is a little bit hard, so let's do this. Let's go L, M, N, O, P. Same again? Wait, what was that?
I mean L, O, I mean M, N, P.
Well, let's try that again. Because what's that letter?
O,
What's that letter?
N.
What's that? Reese has difficulty with L, M, N, O, P. Now, he can do that. He can say that's an L, that's an M, that's an N, that's an O, that's a P, but he can't say L, M, N, O, P. He can't sing it and say it at the same time. I don't know why this happens, but I see it all the time. When children can coordinate a movement with a visual, a letter, they can coordinate and say and touch the letter at the same time, they will know it better. So we do that with the letter song, with the alphabet song, and make sure that our children can touch and say each letter. And we do it over and over and over again because we always teach to mastery. And the thing that we worked with the most with Reese was the LMNOP line. We are getting him to look at the letter as he says its name or sings its name. That's going to be a really critical skill when he learns to read because we need him to look at the letter when he's reading.
X, Y, and Z.
Is there an and there?
I said and.
The
because
song says and, so you're going to go Y and, go like this, Y and, so take your hand, go Y and Z. Do that one again.
Y and Z.
Okay, do you think you can do them all without making any mistakes? I think you can.
Without pointing?
You have to point. That's part of the trick, okay? So do it. I think you can do it.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q.
By looking at the letters as he names them, Reese is developing an image in his mind that is linked with the letter's name. Being able to easily recognize letters is critical to becoming a fluent reader.
I, A, B, C's. Next time, won't you sing with me?
That was pretty darn good. We teach the names of the letters before we teach the sounds of the letters. The logical reason is that an A is always an A. An S is always an S. The name is a constant. The sound changes. I look at it as the A is the big category, just like this is a flower. These are all flowers, but this is a rose. Okay, we have an A. This is a peony. Okay, I have an A, and in this word, with this spelling pattern, it's an A. In this word, with this spelling pattern, it's an A. So we're teaching the category first. We are then go to the sounds. And most of the letters, if you know the name, the sound is easy to learn. B, B. S, S, Z, Z. D, D. There are some letters that don't match their sounds. Y and W, and we have to teach those, especially those don't come naturally, but most of the sounds come easily. Also, the song gives you an anchor for the names. I can sing this song. I have a chant. Even though I don't know what an A is from when I'm 2 years old, I learned the alphabet song. Oh, what's that letter?
Y.
This is a Y. That's a V. Can you say V? Okay, look down at the letter and say V. Point to it and say V.
V.
What's that letter?
V.
Point to it and say V.
V.
And what's that letter?
Z.
Okay.
They
One more
kind
time.
of, so when you put this way, this way, kind of looks like an N.
It does
Like,
kind of look
see?
like an N. Yeah. It was very interesting working with Reese because he pointed out to me in very articulately how V and Z looks like an N and V and Y, and it was exactly the letters that he was getting confused about, and he could even tell us as a kindergartner why they were confusing. Okay, here we go.
Y,
You're telling me that's a Y, and I'm going to tell you that's a V.
V,
So can you say V?
V.
What's at the bottom of the V? A point. What's at the bottom of the V?
Point.
Okay, so
It's kind of, if you turn it this way and there's a line, it kind of looks like, it would look like an A.
it
And
would.
it looks like a triangle when you put it this way, and it
Yeah.
ends.
Okay, but what letter is that? Is it,
Y.
okay, is this A or B?
Y.
Y? Oh my gosh, I have to show you something. Y looks like this, okay? When I first started working with Reese, I was just trying to get him to know V because my assessment had told me V was confusing. I don't work on all of the confusing letters. I work on 1 or 2 confusing letters at a time. I work on 1 letter if he just can't remember the name. And when I first started working with Reese, I thought that he could not remember the name of V. So I get a stack of index cards. Maybe I get 12, maybe I get 14, maybe I get 8. Half of those will be the letter that we're working on, 1 letter. The other half will be letters that he is very confident with, so he doesn't have to think about those. So that I go, what's the name of this letter? What's the name of this letter? As I did that, it was real easy for him to say V, V, V. Let's do V.
V.
What's the name of that letter?
V.
What's at the bottom of the V?
Point.
You got it. Say V.
V.
Okay, what's that letter?
S. B. E. B. C. V. T. V. X.
Let's try these one more time. You think you can go through them again?
There's a lot of V's.
Once Miss Farrell saw that Reese knew the name of the letter V, then she worked on helping Reese discriminate between the letters V and Y.
My job is to figure out a way to make them not confusing. For him, they all looked like they were the same shape. So I have to think, okay, as I was working with him, I saw that he confused V and Y. He'd already told me, oh, they both have these and they look, this has a point here and a point here. So my job is to get him to look at the letter and give him a way to verbalize the difference between the shapes of the letters. And I had never done this before with V and Y, but I looked and I said, well, V has a point at the bottom. And Y doesn't have a point at the bottom. This goes through my mind. Y doesn't have a point at the bottom. What's at the bottom is a line. Okay, so I'll make that difference. This is a V.
And Y.
You got it. Now, there's a line at the bottom of Y. What's at the bottom of Y?
Line.
A line. What's at the bottom of V?
Point.
Okay, say V has a point.
V has a point.
V.
V.
Say Y has a line.
Y has a line.
Y.
Y.
Okay, now point to the point and say V has a point.
V
V.
has a point. V.
Say Y has a line.
Y has a line. Line.
Say Y has a
Y.
line. Y. Okay,
Y
do it
has a
again.
line. Y.
Got to point to the line.
Y has a line. Y. V has a point. V.
Okay, now we're gonna, every time I show you a letter, you have to say that. And then you have to say it, okay? You
Okay.
ready? Okay, here we go.
V has a point. V. V has a point. V. V has a point. V. Y has a line. Y. Y has a line. Y. Y has a line. Y. Y has a line. Y.
Okay, now I want you to try saying them without saying V has a point V. Just say the name of the letter. Go slow. Okay?
Okay. I might go quicker and quicker. Why?
Okay, now you have to look down and point and tell me,
Why?
what does Y have?
A line.
A line. What does V?
V.
It is. I started in this lesson by just getting him to know V. But that wasn't going to work because he still wanted to call it a Y sometimes. So I needed to set up the contrast. And you saw that it worked as long as he said V has a point, Y has a line. V has a point, V. Y has a line, Y. I stopped the scaffolding too quickly because I went back and he looked at it and he just saw 2 lines and he went, why? We need to get, whenever we do a scaffold where we're comparing 2 letters that look similar and we're saying this one has a point at the bottom, this one has a line, he has to do that enough where it is automatic for him to say it and know that letter, and he has to look at it. Because what we want him to do is subliminally, when he stops saying it, being looking at that and thinking it, and then eventually he doesn't have to go through the thinking V has a point, it just automatically becomes V. 2 high fives.
I missed one.
Let's do another one then. Once he got good at Y and V, just those 2 contrasting, then I would put 3 Ys, 3 Vs, and 6 letters that he already knows, so that he would have to think. We're making it just incrementally more difficult for him to have to remember until he just automatically looks at that letter and it's a V, and that one's a Y. And it does happen. Sometimes it happens with practice 25 times, sometimes it happens with practice 250 times, and sometimes it's 1,000 times, but it will happen. 2 high fives.
Choral reading can be done across grade levels and across content area. But always remember that the focus should be on comprehension. So while students will have a great time using choral reading, circle back around and make sure that their comprehension is where you want it to be for that text. Also, carefully choose the text so that it's not too difficult when they first set out.
So today, girls, we're reading a book called Let's Pretend. Who likes to pretend? I do too. I like to pretend. Well, what do you like to pretend? Because there's so many things, so many choices. What do you like to pretend, Jada?
I like to pretend like I'm a doctor.
Okay, that's good. You like to pretend like you're a doctor.
Select a book that works well for reading aloud as a group.
What do you like to
The best materials will be at the independent or instructional reading level of the students,
pretend? You like to pretend
contain dialogue or rhythm, and be relatively short in length.
Keisha, what do you like to pretend?
I like to pretend I'm a teacher just like you.
Oh, that's sweet.
When you're ready to start, make sure each student has a copy of the text so that they can follow along.
Pretending too. Okay, are you with me? Let's pretend we're going to do a choral reading. That means, yep, we're all going to read together. But first, Miss Tisdale is going to model for you how I want you to read. I want you to listen to my voice. Listen to how my voice changes. Remember, we've talked about that word fluency?
Yeah.
And we talk about having great fluency. And especially when someone is speaking, you need to let your audience know that someone is actually speaking, okay? So I'm going to model first, but I want you to follow along with your pointer.
When it's time to start reading, it's the teacher who goes first. It's important to model fluent reading for students, but have them follow along using a marker or finger as you read aloud.
I'm reading, but you're listening and following along so that when you get to that part in the book, you'll be able to do it, okay?
Okay.
Look at Matthew. Matthew is a rabbit. Matthew is not happy. Okay, now I want you to notice on this page that we see quotation marks. And remember, when someone's using quotation marks, that means what? What does that mean, Brianna?
That means that somebody's talking.
Somebody's talking or speaking. So I want you to listen to how my voice changes. Grrr, grrr, said Emma. I am a bear. I am a big bear. Grrr, grrr. Notice I said big bear. I want you to put your finger under the word big. What's different about that word? Talia?
Because big, you supposed to say it loud.
But why?
Change your voice.
Yes, you're right.
So, because the big is, the word is bigger than the other one.
Very good. That word is bigger. The print is larger than the other ones, so it lets you know to say it louder, as Talia said, than the other words.
Finally, have the students read the story aloud in unison. Watch to make sure they are following along in the text.
Now that I've read the book and you followed along with your pointer, I'm ready to hear you read the story. So let's pretend, okay?
When reading with the students, pay attention to their pacing, fluency, and expression.
Matthew is a rabbit. Matthew is not happy.
Grrr, grrr, said Emma. I am a bear. I am a big bear. Grrr, grrr. Look at Matthew and Emma.
That is. No, Markeisha.
Good job, girls.
Choral reading involves important reading practice for students. Students read the same text at the same time. Students develop their reading fluency, they read with more expression, and they read with more confidence and a positive attitude.
So can you growl like a bear? And remember, there's an exclamation point there. Grrr, grrr. Good job.
Madeline Eckford starts her Vanguard, or Advanced Kindergarten class today with a game that focuses kids on the initial sounds of words.
Boys and girls, we're still talking about the letter V, and I've brought a friend along to help me today, help you learn more about the letter V. So I'm going to call you up and we're going to take a look in this box to see what things we can find that begin with the letter V. Clarissa, can you come up and find an item that begins with the letter V?
Miss Eckford encourages lots of participation, which helps her see if anyone is falling behind.
What is that? What did you choose?
A vest.
A vest. And what letter does vest begin with?
V.
Can you make the sound for me? Excellent.
Miss Eckford builds upon alphabetic connections already made. The hallmark of a good reading program is moving through letter-sound connections in a sensible order. The students will next apply their phonemic awareness by manipulating speech sounds within a word. The upcoming exercise will also reinforce links between letters and sounds. In this lesson, kids must create new words by changing letters in old words.
What word did we just create? Van. It's the word van. Very good. Let's try another word. Take away your letters A and N. And we're going to still have our V there. The next letter makes the sound. And then the last letter, we just created the word vet. That's a short way.
Miss Eckford watches for kids who don't grasp this exercise because they are at risk for reading failure. They'll be given one-on-one help. Even in this advanced kindergarten, some kids will be slow to achieve phonemic awareness. No surprise, since phonemic awareness is largely independent of IQ. For these 5-year-olds, rearranging speech sounds is a real challenge. But by the time they reach 3rd grade, phoneme swapping will feel like child's play.
What way is A or yay, a say or say?
You can't speak Pig Latin without a high degree of phonemic awareness.
I may every fay oite is a apple scray. I may every fay oite is a RB.
You have to isolate the first consonants of a word, move them to the end, and add on the sound A.
I may every fay animal is a eagle.
As these kids would tell you, "Oh, ne problem, pray." No problem.
What do we call that vowel sound? And you say short.
O.
You got it.
Callista is in first grade at Windy Hill Elementary School in Calvert County, Maryland. She's an early stage reader who sounds out letters accurately, and she can blend those letters together to form words.
Callista, could you please read this column?
Id, did, ad, al, pal, gum.
Reading expert Linda Farrell is helping Callista take the next step toward fluent reading, reading each word as a whole rather than one sound at a time. Their time together will include work on short vowel sounds, blending and manipulating sounds, reading whole words, and fluency. Miss Farrell starts by making sure Callista has a strong foundation in her short vowel sounds.
Okay, we're going to learn some motions. Can you hold an apple in your hand? And when I ask you the short A sound, you're going to say, ah. Say it.
Ah.
Now watch me. Ah. Pull. You do it.
Pull.
Okay, that is going to remind you of the short A sound. That's our motion. So say, ah.
Ah.
And when I ask you what the short A sound is, you're going to go, ah. Do it.
Ah.
Okay, for short E, go like this. Watch me. Go edge.
Edge.
So we want to start out by making sure she's solid with her short vowel sounds. So that's the first thing we did. And she did know her, when I said, what's short A? She knew it. She had to think a little bit. So what we did is we want her to, when she can't remember the vowel sound real easily, we want to not have to give it to her. We want her to have a scaffold to learn it. So we taught Callista the motions that go with the vowel sounds so that if she can't remember a vowel sound, what is the short O sound? Then all she has to do, I can go like this and remind her, or she can go, oh, it's octopus. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go to short O. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. Octopus. Do it.
Octopus.
Now we're not going to say the octopus part. We're just going to say ah. What's the short O sound?
Ah.
And make the motion. Ah. What's the short A sound?
Ah.
Short O?
Ah.
Okay, now we're going to learn short U. Are you ready for short U? Up. Do it.
Up.
And the first sound in up is What's the short U sound? Short A?
Ah.
Short O?
Ah.
Short U? The vowel motions that we teach are purposefully motions. They aren't static. Because if I say you can hardly hear the difference between those sounds. And children who have phonological awareness difficulties, which is the biggest problem in reading issues, they don't hear the vowel sounds easily. Listen to this. A, I, they sound different. So we want to encourage the children not to say ah. We want them to say ah. Therefore, the motion that we use, which is holding an apple, and then move it across the front of your body, left to right, motion of reading, ah. And then pull is what the rest of the word is, but we only say the first sound. Everything encourages them to draw out that sound. Okay, now we're going to learn short I. Are you ready for short I? Okay, watch this. I went stomping. I went hiking and I stomped and tromped in some poison ivy. And boy, do I itch. Do it. Do this. Itch. Do it. Itch. Now, you have to smile real big when you say itch. Go. Do it again. Short I sound.
Itch.
Okay, and itch is the guide word. I made a mistake. I should have told you that I is just like this. I. We don't even say the ch part. Just do this. I. What's the short I sound?
I. I.
Make it go I.
I.
What's the short A sound?
Ah.
Short I.
I.
Short I.
I.
Short A.
Ah.
Short O.
Oh.
Short U.
Uh.
You know your short vowel sounds. Calista was very confident with her vowel sounds. She knew them. I would still have worked on them a little bit more, but she was confident enough for me to move on to the next step. So the next step with a kid who's reading sound by sound isn't really intuitive. It's often a phonological problem. It isn't a problem with the letters. The kid knows the letters. I know the letter sounds. I can blend the letter sounds into a real word. What they aren't doing is thinking the sounds in their mind. They're turning that word, if it's hug. They look at it and they go, g. And they are never getting the full visual picture of that word. To them, it's always an H-U-G, an h-g, not hug. So they haven't moved to the where they can read the whole word without breaking it into phonics. And that's a step that we're going to have to teach her to do, which is one of my favorite things to do, because it's just, they just go from being really slow readers to just being normal readers once they can get this phonological representation. We're going to do something that we call sound chaining. Okay? I'm going to show you how it works. So I say, Miss Linda, show me the sounds in lip. So I go, O, I, P, lip. You touch and say.
U, I, P, lip.
Okay, what's the first sound in lip?
L.
L is the name of the letter. What's the sound?
Ooh.
What's the next sound in lip?
I.
I is the name of the letter. What's the sound?
I.
Okay, and when I ask you, you point to it, okay? So what's the first sound in lip?
Ooh.
What's the next sound in lip?
I.
And the last sound in lip? P. And what's the
Lip.
word? Okay, so that's lip. If I want to change lip to sip, I take out the O and I put in a S. Touch and say sip.
I. Sip.
What if I want to change sip to tip?
You take away this one and add
Okay,
this
so what
one.
did I take out? Sip to tip. Say sip to tip.
sip to tip.
Which one did I take out? If this is sip, take out.
The s and add the t.
Okay, now I want to change tip to Tim. So let's touch and say tip.
I. Tip.
Now touch and say Tim.
I. Tim.
Which one's different?
The last one.
So what do I take out of tip to change
last
tip to
one.
Tim? And what sound do I take out?
P.
P is the name of the letter. What's the sound? Okay, take it out. And what do I put in to make it Tim?
M.
M is the name of the letter. What's the sound?
Okay.
So now I've got Tim. Touch and say Tim.
I. Tim.
I want to change Tim to Tom. When we work with sound by sound children, we make sure that they know the difference between letters and sounds and that they can manipulate sounds. Once they can blend and segment sounds confidently, we move to manipulating. How do we do that? We work with colored tiles. They don't have letters on them because we want the child to have no distraction with letters. What we want is the child to be thinking about sounds. Touch and say tap.
App. Tap.
Can you change tap to tape?
Miss Farrell gives Calista plenty of quiet time to think about which sounds are changing.
check that, because one thing you did right is there's always only one tile that changes. Let's touch and say tap.
Tap.
Touch and say tape.
Ape. Tape.
Which one's different?
The middle.
Yeah. What sound do you take out of tap?
A.
A is the name of the letter. What sound do you take out of tap?
Ah.
Okay, take it out. And what sound do you put in to make tape?
E.
Say tape.
Ape.
Say touch and say.
Ape. Tape.
What sound was that?
A.
It was A. Okay, so you put in the sound A. If I want to change tape to take, which one do I change?
This one.
Yes. What sound do I take out of tape?
P.
What sound? Yeah. Okay, and what sound do I put in to make it take? Now, this time, when I ask you to make the change, keep your mouth closed and think about it, okay? Okay, so don't open your mouth. You can think the sounds in your head. So we've got take to make. Okay, look down. You can look down. Take to make. Can you say take to make?
Take to make.
Okay. Which one changes? Keep your mouth closed. Don't. You have to think the sounds, okay? Okay, so take out t. And what are you going to put in for make? What sound? Okay, can you change? Now again, mouth closed. Okay, but I'm going to ask you to say make to mate. Say that. Make to mate.
To mate.
Okay, close your mouth and think about which one. When you know, touch it. Okay, what sound comes out of make? Take it out. What sound goes in for mate? Okay. One of the things Callista does is I say, what's the first sound? And she gives me the name of the letter. And we've got to get sound by sound children to think in terms of there are letter sounds and there are letter names. Because the name of the letter, the first letter in phone is P, but the first sound in phone is F. And if she doesn't get the difference automatically and quickly, she'll always be struggling with reading. It's easy to teach. It's no big deal. And I think that you see Callista make great strides in her reading. Back and start again.
Now we're at the point where Miss Farrell will push Callista to a higher level of reading, from reading words sound by sound to reading whole words.
Could you please read this column?
Did, add, al, pal, gum, it, kit.
Students who read sound by sound see a letter, make it a sound, see a letter, make it a sound, see a letter, make it a sound. So this is what's happening. What that keeps her from being able to do is develop a visual imprint of words and word patterns on her brain. And you never look at the word as a whole. We're trying to get Callista to look at the word as a whole, as opposed to looking at it letter by letter by letter. Now what I'd like you to do is I want you to go back and this time keep your mouth closed before and think the sounds and don't open your mouth until you know what the word is and can read it, okay?
Did,
Keep going.
add, pal, and mud.
Okay. Whew, you got pretty good there, didn't you? Closing your mouth.
You can sense the wheels turning in Callista's mind as she works silently to sound out the letters and put the sounds together into a word. Next comes work on fluency.
start right here.
Can the lad.
Okay, now go back and read it again.
Can the lad.
Now, can you go back and read it? Can the lad? Okay, read it.
Can the lad
Okay.
be in the mud?
Okay, read it like you'd say it.
Be in the mud.
Okay, now read the whole sentence.
Can the lad be in the mud?
Okay, can you read that one?
Kim was hot and got a fan. Kim was hot and got a fan.
Okay, we're going to go and read a couple of sentences now. Those were phrases and they turned into sentences. Could you please read this sentence?
Gus got mud on the rug.
Okay, and now we're going to go read passage. Okay, what's the title?
Don and Pip.
Okay,
Don was a lad. Pip was a pup. Don and Pip had a one. The sun was hot.
but she was getting faster as she closed her mouth. She made more mistakes than she would make if she read sound by sound. She didn't make that many mistakes, but she did make more mistakes. But that's okay, because that's what happens when you start changing a habit, is you go backwards a little bit. She'll eventually, and I think fairly quickly, be a much faster reader and a much more proficient reader. Do you ever read a book that you like?
I just wanted to highlight some of the videos that you have viewed. First of all, what is choral reading? When the teacher and class read a text aloud together, it takes the spotlight off of struggling readers while encouraging them to participate. Research suggests that it improves reading fluency, expands vocabulary, and increases students' confidence. How does choral reading help ELLs? Choral reading is one strategy to help ELLs practice their reading fluency. During choral reading, the teacher and a group of students read a text together. This allows students to practice reading the text fluently and without the stress of missing a word. You can differentiate in choral reading by assigning readings to groups of students based on ability level. This can be done during reading stations, guided reading groups, or pulling out small groups of students during independent reading time or readers' theater. I believe choral reading is effective. Choral reading helps build students' fluency, self-confidence, and motivation. Always choose a book or a passage that works well for reading aloud as a group, patterned or predictable, not too long, at the independent reading level of most students. Provide each student a copy of the text so they may follow along, read the passage or story aloud, and model fluent reading for the students. And that's the key term with working with ELL students and with students who are low achievers, is to model each step of reading, or whether you're doing math, and model how you're thinking. Ask the students to use a marker or finger to follow along with the text as they read. Reread the passage and have all students in the group read the story or passage aloud in unison. Overall, what are the steps in teaching reading? Pre-reading behaviors. Students must have an awareness of print for signs, labels, and packaging. For example, they know a sign says McDonald's. Sound manipulation games. Hannah, Hannah, banana, banana, fana, fofana, mima, mama, mana, Hannah. Awareness of rhyme. Concepts about print. Does the child know which way up on a book? Do they know where the front of the book is, the back of the book? Sound discrimination. Max is eating a muffin. Muffin. Those start with the same sound. They must learn their letters. Letters don't have to be taught in alphabetical order. That's interesting. Mastering a single letter involves two different skills. They must identify the letter visually and memorize the sound. Use senses and movement to help kids memorize letters. Build the letter with clay. You could draw the letter with your finger on the child's back. Associate a motion with the letter sound. Step 3, blending sounds. Moving from knowing single letters to reading words is all about blending the sounds together. Using a 2 or 3 letter word, point to the letters and say each sound. Then start back at the beginning of the word. Slide your fingers slowly under the letters as you stretch the sounds and put them together. Have the child to do it. Step 4, start introducing sight words. Sight word practice can include flashcards, hunting for words in books, using computer games such as Starfall and ABC Y'all. Work with word families, step 5. Man, pan, fan. Use phonics skills. Work on your blends, such as BL, TR, SK, DR, SM, your digraphs, such as SH, TH, WH, CH, CK, and your glued sounds. These are a blend but are 3 letters and come at the end of the word. ALL, ELL, ANK, INK, ONK, ANG, ING, UNG. So overall, these are just a few steps in teaching a child how to read, the stages of learning to read. Awareness and exploration of reading, pre-K, emergent reading, pre-K to early kindergarten, early reading, kindergarten to grade 1, transitional reading stage, grade 1 to grade 2, and fluent reading stage. Other steps to teach your child to read at home. Use songs and nursery rhymes. Make simple word cards. Engage your child in a print-rich environment. Play word games at home. Understand the core skills involved in teaching kids to read. Play with letter magnets. Phonemic awareness is the first step in learning how to read. It is the understanding that words are made up of individual sounds called phonemes. Phonemic awareness enables readers to hear the individual units of sounds in words, identify them, and use them both in speech and later in writing.
like, let's see what's going to be in this story. Once down a foxhole lived a family of fox kids. There was Frank, there was Floyd, and there was Freddie and Flo.
Reading aloud is probably the best single activity to put a child on the road to becoming a reader.
Right, and you know this word.
But parents can do even more to assure a good start.
What's this?
Fish.
Does fish start with an F?
Yes, ma'am.
4-year-old Neil's parents have played word games with her ever since she could speak. Word games can build what's called phonemic awareness, the insight that words are made up of individual sounds or phonemes. Many kids need a little help learning how to pick apart the sounds within a word.
If you hear two words that...
Excellent.
Miss Eckford builds upon alphabetic connections already made. The hallmark of a good reading program is moving through letter-sound connections in a sensible order. The students will next apply their phonemic awareness by manipulating speech sounds within a word. The upcoming exercise will also reinforce links between letters and sounds. In this lesson, kids must create new words by changing letters in old words.
What word did we just create? It's the word van. Very good. Let's try another word. Take away your letters A and N. And we're going to still have our V there. The next letter makes the sound. And then the last letter, we just created the word vet. And that's a short way.
Miss Eckford watches for kids who don't grasp this exercise because they are at risk for reading failure. They'll be given one-on-one help. Even in this advanced kindergarten, some kids will be slow to achieve phonemic awareness. No surprise, since phonemic awareness is largely independent of IQ. For these 5-year-olds, rearranging speech sounds is a real challenge. But by the time they reach 3rd grade, phoneme swapping will feel like child's play.
What way is A or yay, a bay or tay?
You can't speak Pig Latin without a high degree of phonemic awareness.
I may fay oite is a apple scray.
I may fay oite is a
You have to isolate the first consonants of a word, move them to the end, and add on the sound A.
I may fay animal is a eagle lay.
As these kids would tell you, one oblimbre, no problem.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Emergent Literacy podcast. I know that you've read the emergency literacy in the Emergent Literacy chapter in your book. Hopefully this will reinforce the ideas. Some of you are high school or adult teachers and may wonder why we need to talk about emergent literacy. There's a couple of reasons. First, you may have a student move in who has not had any literacy experiences. Also, as you complete the courses and become endorsed, your state may certify you as a pre-K through 12 ESOL teacher. I wanted to go over the difference between emergent literacy and reading readiness. As we begin to learn more about beginning readers and writers, we have discovered that we need to use an emergent literacy model rather than reading readiness model. For example, a student would have to be able to show that they had mastered visual discrimination by telling which picture was different before being allowed to have reading instruction in the reading readiness model. They would have to be able to color inside the lines before they were allowed to write. And we found that some students were coming to school already reading, but the teacher didn't know that because she would not offer the instruction, didn't think that they were ready. So in the 1960s, Marie Clay coined the term emergent literacy. Unlike reading readiness, she found that children learn literacy skills from birth. Emergent readers are just that. They are emerging in their literacy development. They understand that print tells the story and not the pictures. This is a huge step. Students are developing an awareness of print. There are different stages of literacy development. We will focus on the first three in this podcast. During early emergent literacy, students are becoming more interested in books and literacy. They're developing understanding of print concepts. This usually develops in pre-kindergarten through first grade. In the emergent literacy stage, the oral language expands, reading and writing become more conventional, and students are able to figure out pronunciation of some words. This is normally kindergarten and first grade level. The beginning reading and writing stage further develops the skills. Reading becomes more fluent and bigger words are decoded, and this happens normally in first through third grade. The next few slides show what we can do to help develop these early literacy skills. Here's some things that we can do in kindergarten or before. I put age levels on these last few slides, but I want you to also think about your ELL students who have not had experiences in literacy. During first exposures to print, you want to use lots of environmental print. Here's something that almost everybody can read. Part of what you're doing is convincing the student that he or she is a reader. Another example of environmental print is a stop sign. The teacher can expand on the student's knowledge and use predictable text. The student now also knows three words: I, can, and read. The class can compile all the things they can read and make a predictable book. Another activity that teachers can use to access prior knowledge is to have students bring in examples of other things that they can read, such as a Coke can or Dorito bag. Then a word wall can be developed, and they can see all of the things that they can already read. The National Reading Panel has studied research in literacy development and found these 5 important areas. For emergent literacy understanding, we will focus on the first 3. And I also added concepts of print as an important area. Concepts of print look like really common sense things, but if children don't have these understandings, they will not learn how to read. Many people confuse phonemic awareness and phonics. Phonemic awareness is all about the sounds that you will hear. These are the things that can be developed in phonemic awareness. It's really interesting, but from my experience, rhyming is really hard to teach. Children who are read to and are in environments with lots of playing with oral language can easily hear rhymes. However, to formally teach rhyming, it's very difficult. Teaching rhyming is also hard for ELL students to grasp. They don't have the English vocabulary to know what might rhyme. In blending, we're blending words or letter sounds together. Segmenting, we're taking them apart. And we're listening to the number of syllables in words. And a lot of times you may do a clapping activity or a snapping activity so students can hear those different syllables. Phonics is concerned with the sound-letter relationship. For example, in phonics, students learn that the letter B makes the B sound. We're concerned with seeing the letter B on the paper and knowing when you see that letter, it'll say B. Beginning readers then use this information to sound out words. It is important to remember that reading is not just sounding out words, but making meaning. Comprehension skills need to be developed in the earliest beginning readers. I've heard many ELL students read passages in English fluently, but they have no idea what they've just read. They're not reading, they are word calling. There are a couple different schools of thought in teaching reading. In whole language, a teacher provides lots of literature exposure and very little explicit phonics instruction. In a traditional program, the focus is a bottom-up model where explicit instruction is given in phonics, with little regard to the literature. A combination of both of these is probably the best model. We need to provide a balanced literacy program for developing both reading and writing skills. Explained in the next few slides are the components of both the reading and writing areas of a balanced literacy program. Read aloud. During shared reading, a predictable text is often used. During a guided reading lesson, the students are placed in leveled groups according to their learning needs. In a typical lesson, the teacher works with about 4 to 6 students for 20 or 30 minutes. There may be a familiar reread first. The students practice a previously learned skill with a text that they can read independently. Then the teacher works with the students on a new skill, and they practice reading text that requires that skill. The goal is to get students to the independent reading level. It's important not to neglect the writing part of literacy. The first step is to model the writing process and show students the importance of writing. In shared writing, the students and the teacher compose the text with the teacher acting as a scribe. During interactive writing, the teacher has different students write beginning sounds, ending sounds, chunks, or whole words that they might hear. Just like independent reading, we are trying to get children and students to become independent writers. There are definite stages in writing development. The next few slides show the progression of a beginning writer. Parents sometimes get concerned about their child using invented spelling. However, it's an important step in developing writing. Here are some benefits. We have to remember that literacy learning needs to be continuously supported. Language experience activity is a strategy that can be used with any age. Many times it is completed after the students have experienced a common experience. Each child tells the teacher a sentence about the experience with the topic. The teacher many times writes the child name after the sentence. The student now owns that sentence and will know how to read it. The story is read aloud. Sometimes the teacher has the students write and illustrate their sentence on the page and then compiles the pages into a book. In my experience, this is the book that is the most checked out in the classroom library. Here you can see the benefits of the language experience. During emergent literacy, reading, writing, speaking, listening, and thinking all develop. Thanks for listening.
Which is part of the speaking and listening domain. I've written a couple blog posts on speaking and listening, and it is definitely one of the skills and the domains that is a little bit skipped over. And I know that's easy to do because the kids are learning how to speak to each other and listen to each other anyways, but I do think it is important to intentionally teach those skills on top of them naturally practicing on their own. So the first thing that I suggest is to have them start practicing their listening skills just with what you're saying. So you're going to start only with teacher-led instruction, and you're not going to involve peer-to-peer yet. You're going to do things like directed drawings or step-by-step activities, kind of like last week when we talked about all those little foldables, which are not on my desk anymore. But we talked about some free foldable activities for students to do that would require step-by-step listening to the teacher. And even physical games like Simon Says, where they have to intentionally listen for instructions given to them. My favorite teacher-led direction following activity is definitely a directed drawing, or one of those coloring pages where they're given a blank picture and they're told to draw a bunny under the color that bunny gray. Directed drawings and I think coloring activities are really fun, especially for those younger students. And then once you practice those skills, you can shift into conversational skills. Now, conversation skills is where you're going to get started with peer-to-peer. And it is something that you do need to teach how to have a conversation. The students already know how to talk to each other. That is true. But there are ways that you're going to expect conversation in the classroom that are more than just what they've done for the entirety of their lives. So you have to set out rules, and you have to give them modeling where they're seeing the way that you're supposed to hold a conversation with somebody. So for example, in one of my units, I don't know which grade level this is for, I lay out a collaborative conversation set of rules. So the students know how to have a collaborative conversation with each other. They know what to do with their eyes, what to do with their mouths, what to do with their hands, and how to be kind to one another. And then another thing that I suggest when you're shifting into teaching about conversation is to give them high interest topics that they have experience with. So don't ask them to hold a conversation about, what they just learned about in science class. Ask them to have conversations about things they know, things they can very easily say. This huge long story about one time that they were sick and what happened, and then their mom came over and then this happened. Of course, it will be more streamlined than that, but give them things that they know about, give them things they can talk about, and that will be their strong practice for that. Another thing with conversational skills is the importance of teaching students to elaborate. And this there are standards in speaking and listening where students are expected to build on each other's conversations and to build on each other's stories. So the importance of teaching students to elaborate on a previous statement is also very important when you're teaching them how to have conversations. So this can be done during storytelling. It can be done when you're asking, like if they're having interview style questions, if they ask a student, okay, well, what's your favorite food? And then they say pizza. You're going to teach students how to elaborate on that thought using the words because, such as, giving more stems for them to really be able to verbally elaborate on an idea. And then the other side of it, where when one student is listening to the other student, the first student that's listening can elaborate on something that the speaker is talking about. So they are going to have to be able to elaborate on both things, on things that they say and things that they hear. So that's very important to build on top of your conversation skills. And this is just an example. So this is actually a listening activity for the students where one student will pull an event card and they will have to verbally tell a story about this event card. And then the listener is going to have to listen to that event and draw what they're hearing. So they're going to have to elaborate on the speaker's story because they're going to have to just simply listen. They don't get to see the picture on the event card. So they're going to have to elaborate on what the characters look like, where they're at with the setting, what's happening in the auditory story that they're hearing. So that's just one example of how to teach students to elaborate when they're trying to have conversations with each other and practice those listening skills. Another thing that you need to do, and this one is pretty tricky, especially for young students, I guess older students too, because tempers can flare, but make sure that you are teaching students how to disagree with one another. It is easy for students to agree with one another because when they're agreeing with each other, they can very easily not have their feelings hurt, and there's no emotion in that because what they said, somebody is agreeing with. So it is important to teach students how to be respectful when they're disagreeing with each other, because if you teach that at an early age, you can build it for grades to come, so that as students are taught how to have conversations and have debates and be able to really hold their own in maybe an argument, or not an argument, but a strong conversation about a topic, you do need to teach them how to disagree. So you're going to provide stems. For example, when they're building a conversation, you're going to give them examples of, if they agree, you're going to give them stems. Or if they disagree, you're going to give them stems. So typically, if you're going to teach them how to disagree with somebody, the one that my students always loved is they would say, I respectfully disagree with blah, 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 because, and then they would give their reason. And we would just make sure to practice those skills, because the more students hear respectful disagreement, the stronger their conversation skills will become. And I would definitely suggest starting this early, because if you wait until third or fourth grade to teach students to disagree with one another, then they're going to be so used to just hearing people agree with them that once they get to that disagreement, it's going to kind of take them back a little bit, and it might crush them a little bit, and they won't want to talk in front of the class anymore. If they get up and somebody says, I don't agree with that statement, if they're not used to hearing those respectful disagreements, then it really might alter how they feel about talking in public or talking in front of their class or their classmates, which is a skill that is expected in Common Core speaking and listening domains. So I have an activity, I think this one's from my third grade speaking and listening unit, where you're giving them examples and non-examples of respectful and disrespectful topics or sentences on a topic. So you're going to give them sentences where they have to cut and sort good and weak responses. And a weak response is going to be something that if they disagree, they just say, I don't like it, or I don't agree with that, or I think that idea is stupid. I don't think I rate stupid, but and they have to find those and say that that is not a good example of something that I should say to somebody when I'm listening to them. And then they have to find the good examples too. So giving them those good or examples and non-examples is very important, because that's just another form of modeling for them. So another thing, and we kind of touched on this at the beginning, is to give them opportunities to practice different roles. And I know that today we're focusing more on listening and teaching those students how to listen, but it is important to teach students the roles that they have when they are two different people. So they're going to learn things that they have to do when they're a speaker, and they're going to learn what they have to do when they're a listener. And they need to know that there are two different rule sets for each role. So you're going to give them lots of opportunities to practice that. And like I said at the beginning of the video today, you want to give them things that they know a lot about. You want to give them things that they've had experience with in their life, or that is an easy enough topic for them to just think, I saw a TV show on that, or I've experienced that in my life, I can talk about that. You don't want to give them things at the very beginning that are going to require more like content, skill, academic based. You will eventually get to that as the years progress, because with Common Core, they build and get harder each year. But when you're first starting, you really want to give them things that they know about, that they can talk about, that it's easy for them to hold a back and forth conversation about something. Or if they're the speaker, they can say 3 to 4 sentences on that topic and not feel like they don't know enough about that academic topic. So always make sure to kind of include and give them opportunities to talk about easy stuff, so that they can really focus on the skill instead of the subject or the content. So you're also going to try to work speaking and listening into your schedule. 10 to 15 minutes of your school day. It might be during your morning meeting or right before your ELA block, or maybe if you have 10 minutes before recess and math, or even at the end of the day. Finding 10 to 15 minutes to be intentional about practicing those skills. Once you figure out how to fit it into your day, and after you have just taught the students basically how to just have conversations and disagree with one another and respectfully agree with one another, now you can really dive deep into the standards. And when you get a little bit deeper into the standards, what they expect students to be able to do with speaking and listening does get a little bit more difficult. So Common Core requires students to do more speaking and listening activities with auditory things, like they have to make recordings of themselves reading a book, go back and listen to it, and judge how they were reading during that. They have to listen to stories, we talked about this earlier, and build stories with drawings. They're creating audio, and then they are also having to tie in a lot of these standards with their comprehension skills. So each grade level touches on using these speaking and listening skills during a read aloud, or finding the main idea of what your teacher has read and verbally expressing that main idea and supporting with details. What we talked about at the beginning was more, here's how to have conversations with each other, here's how to listen to each other, and then it's going to get a little bit deeper. Things get a little bit more complicated in the speaking and listening realm. They're required to do a little bit more with text and audio. I mean, you can even tie some visual things in there where the students are recording themselves. A lot of teachers are starting to get a lot more technology-based things in the classroom, so you can even tie some of that in. These are just two examples of how these speaking and listening skills that they learned about at the very beginning will eventually transform into more hands-on activities that deal with read-alouds and storytelling activities. So one of these gives story stems for when they're listening to stories, and that can even be an activity that you do every single time you have a read aloud. You have these stems where you ask students to finish the sentence with their partner, and then they have to agree or disagree or build on what the partner said. And then the other picture is where the students have to audio tell a story about the picture that they see, and then the students will draw the story or write the story based on what the first partner said. And then there's a second activity there where they have to finish a drawing. So they have a sentence, they have a picture, and then they have to build the rest of that illustration based on what it says in the picture.
Now we're going to take a moment to look at how you can use word banks to help children to become better readers.
The word banks are a great resource for ELLs because it lessens the anxiety for them because they are exposed to the type of vocabulary that they need to be used within context. So here's an example of a word bank that is used for poetry. And here we have examples of where ELLs can pull different vocabulary specific to different seasons and use them for their poem. As a great oral activity and a way to assess knowledge, you can have students come up with a list of words that they think of when they think of a specific topic. In this one, the students thought of vocabulary that they'd be associated with Halloween, and the whole class was able then to utilize that word bank. Here's another great word bank surrounding around penguins, and you can use these for your higher level ELLs if they have more sentence structure in their repertoire, and then from that word bank they can create a story. They can use write sentences. But there's also another strategy using sentence frames that I'll get into another video, where you can expose ELLs who are not able to create their own sentences without help, and they're able to create very creative sentences on their own. The Enchanted Learning website has dozens and dozens of topics for word banks. So if you're looking for a word bank that has already been created and don't want to reinvent the wheel, this is a great resource for you to use as well. One of the critical parts of vocabulary is assessing what students know and how much they need to get in order to reach their goals. So this is a great tracking tool to look at how much vocabulary your students have gained. Word banks are wonderful tools that can be used in every subject area. This is an example of a math word bank, and it allows students to remember specific vocabulary when they're answering open-ended questions, when they're in dialogue with their friends. It also allows them to be able to speak more academically and intellectually when they're discussing certain terms. Then here's a commonly way in which word banks are used in classrooms, where you have sentences and students have to choose amongst a list of words that best completes the sentence. This is great for a level 2. For a level 1 student, you may want to add pictures to the words so that they are able to gain the meaning of the word by looking at the picture.
I hope that you were able to gain some value out of the different resources and ways that you can know and assess what your ELLs know.
These are charts that you can use as resources for your students. You can have more powerful verbs, adjectives, figurative language. After these charts, I'm going to show you also a word bank in which I have many pages of adjectives, verbs, figurative language for your students to use as a resource. Let's go through these different charts and resources. On the top of page 33, what you will see is a chart for characters in a story. A character can be an animal or a person. So for the animal, what I have is, I just have a pretend animal on the chart, and then I start with nouns. So I have all the different parts of the animal, their fur, their claws, their teeth, their eyes, and then I have descriptive words underneath those parts. Why did I do that? Because what do adjectives do? They describe the noun. So when they have a come alive box, they're writing their nouns first, and if they have an animal, they could go to their animal chart, find that part of the animal, and see many different adjectives to choose from. I've done the same for people, where I have the parts of people, their hair, their eyes, their smile, whatever it may be. I also have a figurative language chart on this page, where I have secret formulas, which I will show you in a moment, that students will learn in order to add figurative language to their writing. On page 37 through 49 in your book, you can Xerox off back to back, staple together these pages to make a resource for your students so that they can have more powerful adjectives and verbs. Let's look at each one of those pages. On page 38 is a picture of a person so that you can pull adjectives for the parts of a person to describe their appearance. On page 39 is an animal, so that you can pull adjectives to describe the appearance of an animal. Page 40 has personality words, different words you can use to describe the personality of a character. On page 41, you could have emotion words, words that you will use, more sophisticated words to use to describe the emotion, how the character is feeling. On page 42, 43, we have the 5 senses word bank. On page 42, this is the 5 senses of what something looks like. Notice we don't just have what something looks like, we have the brightness, size, color, speed, texture, shape. When you're talking about describing something, what it looks like, these are the different characteristics that you would go to, and then you would find those description words. On the next page, you'll notice a hand, which will say what something feels like, its flexibility or its temperature, and you have words below that. Next to the hand, you'll have what something sounds like, loud sounds, soft sounds. So that way students can go to those words for descriptions. We also have the what something tastes like, the flavor, or what something smells like, good smells, bad smells. So these are descriptive words that your students can go to for the 5 senses. On page 44-45, if you are describing the setting, I have 2 different settings here. I have a city setting and I have a country setting. Again, I have the nouns labeling the different parts of the city or the country. So we could have windows, people, the buildings, the sounds, the trees, the weather. And then we have descriptive words underneath those nouns in order to help describe the city or the country. Let's skip to page 48 and notice this has verbs. Because the verb kicks off the predicate, it is the most powerful part of speech, and we want our students to have powerful verbs. So I've listed some typical verbs that you would see in many different Come Alive box or stories for students to replace those common verbs with more sophisticated language. On page 49, this is where students can record their favorite word. As they're reading their own books, as they're focusing on the story of the week in language arts, if they're listening to a read aloud and they hear words that they absolutely love, they record them on this page. What I suggest is that you have the students write adjectives, nouns, and verbs, draw lines, and then have them record their favorite words underneath one of those columns. So if they want to use it in their own writing, they right away have identified the part of speech, which is critical because you know, oh, I want to add an adjective. Maybe one of my favorite words could be that adjective, and they just go to the adjective column instead of just a bunch of words written on a page. Let's turn back to page 33. On this page, I display charts that you could make for your students to use as a resource for their Come Alive box or for any writing in their narratives. But also on the bottom of this page, I have the figurative language chart. In that word bank that I had shown you, you had all these different resource pages for adjectives, nouns, verbs, and you also had 2 pages that said figurative language. On those 2 pages, on pages 46 and 47, they have secret formulas. In the next video, I'm going to go through all the secret formulas that you can help students learn in order to write figurative language on their own.